if you can let people in. We'll be popping in. Hey, Melanie. So we've just gotten started. So I want to welcome everyone to our Empathy Cafe today. Our topic is how might we build the empathy movement? And we have two sort of sub-projects going. One is a training for our Empathy Circle facilitation training. And the other project is I'm running for Congress here in the California District 8. And as the empathy movement candidate. So those are two topics that we have we can talk about in the circle, but the overall topic is how do we build the empathy movement? And we can get started by just introducing ourselves, a name, your location, and why you're interested in being here. Like I said, I'm Edwin Rutsch from the San Francisco Bay Area. And I just think that the world has a huge empathy deficit. And if we can create increase the level of empathy in the world, it'll just create a better world. And so kind of dedicated my life to that mission. And the empathy circle that we're doing here, I just find is the best first step gateway practice for building those empathy skills and mindset. And so we're trying to spread that as widely as possible. Larry, would you like to go?
Yeah, I'm Larry in Florida. I'm a retired occupational therapist, and I'm relatively new to these empathy circles, and I'm just amazed at the impact that an empathy circle has on the way human beings communicate with one another. And I really think that empathy is the missing link to humans being able to just live in peace without dropping bombs on one another. So, you know, I can't think of anything I'd rather do for the rest of my life than in some way spreading empathy, I guess you'd call it that, you know, just living it and sharing it. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, thanks. Bill?
Yeah, my name is Bill Filler. I'm a retired special education teacher. I dealt with really challenging students who were in danger of being removed from their home or going to prison or being hospitalized. And I just learned in my job how important it was to listen. And when they felt heard, then we established a relationship from which they could then improve and they could communicate with their words rather than their fists. And so that's why I'm here, because I think the world needs it. Thank you.
Thanks. Mike?
Hi, I'm Mike Zonta. I live in San Francisco. And I've been involved in spirituality, let's say, for my life. And I think that that empathy, these empathy circles is one way to I don't know. I feel very energized and excited when I go through the process. So I think it's helpful to everybody, including the spiritual community. So that's it.
Thanks, Mike. Anne?
Yeah, I'm Anne Jordan. I live in the southwest of England, and I think empathy circles are really valuable to aid us communicating with one another in a meaningful way. And I guess that's been like in my work all my life, from when I was just graduated from university, working with young people in a psychiatric hospital, and what they needed was someone to listen to them, and that was the main thing. So here I am, trying to spread this practice. Over to Melanie.
Hello, I'm Melanie. I'm in Seattle right now, but I'm in the process of moving to Orange County, California, where it's warmer and 55 plus community, more people to engage with. So I'm excited about that. I live in a co-housing community up here in Seattle, And we're having a work party today, so I had to decide about going to a work party or coming to this. And I chose this because I find it so much fun to really hear people from all over the world communicate. And I've been a trainer with the Center for Nonviolent Communication for over 30 years. So it's what I like to do.
Great, thanks, Melanie. John?
Is the question just why are
Yeah,
we
your
here? This is
name,
my first-
location, why you're here. Yeah.
Okay, I'm John. I'm currently in Puerto Morelos, Mexico, but we're based near Chicago, and currently planning our return to the Chicagoland area. And I'm here because I want to. This is my first empathy circle, but I would like to be more skilled in communication, and I think that there's a huge need in the world professionally and within my family dynamics and community dynamics for more effective communication. And so I want to build some skills around that. So I'm excited to be here.
Great, well, welcome. Vera?
Hi, everyone. Weird German name with lots of B's and W's. Just pretend it's with a V. Vera, lovely to meet you all. I'm currently in Austin, but I work for the San Francisco Playhouse, which is a theater in downtown San Francisco, and we call ourselves the Empathy Gym. And so I'm also an actor, but my background is in psychology. I finished my master's in psych, and one of my former professors from Cal was talking about this or joining this on LinkedIn. And so I that's how I kind of got to know about it. And I thought, wow, something I could check out. I have no idea about this forum, about empathy circles, but that caught my attention. And so I'm always looking for ways to kind of meld psychology and the performing arts and theater and our creative process in general. And so excited to be here and learn more about it. So thank you for having me.
Great, well, so welcome. So glad you're here. So next, I just want to just give a quick introduction to two websites. So actually, let me change that URL. This is our training website. I'm just going to quickly show this for the people who are new. I'll do a screen share. So this is the Empathy Circle Facilitation training. So this is a training we have. You can go to that site, bestempathytraining.com. And there's a video that reviews the website, and it's, I'm just going to quickly go through to the bottom here. You can see we have some Empathy Circle facilitation trainings, and they're usually on Saturdays or Mondays, and the next one is on Monday, May 9th. So you're welcome to check that out, click through, and if you're interested in taking the training, it's 5 weeks. I don't know if you want to say anything about it, Bill. Bill's kind of the lead on that.
Sure. Join, come. What we do is that we, we teach you how to basically conduct and facilitate these circles. That's what it's about. And so we've gotten very good feedback about it. It's been fun. And we also try to build an empathic community. So, a lot of people who have taken the training have become good friends. So that's it.
Yeah, thanks. So you just go to that site, then you can click through, you'll find out all the information. There's a prerequisite that you take part in 2 empathy circles just as a participant, just to get familiar with it. Taking part today in this circle is counts as one of the circle, taking part in 1 empathy circle. So usually these sessions on Saturday have been about just introducing the training and then doing an empathy circle, but we're trying to really build an empathy movement. And so for that reason, I'm running for Congress as the empathy candidate. So if you go to edwinforcongress.com, and I put that link in there, there's more about my candidacy. You can go through and check that out. There's a link there for volunteering, for donating to the campaign. We have our primary June 7th. So I'm out there, saying we need more empathy and really trying to raise empathy and the empathy movement, to the national, discussion. And there's a video there that it's from a documentary about the mediation work we've done in Berkeley and Sacramento and Los Angeles, really mediating between the political left and right, and just all kinds of info. The district that I'm running in is, if you're familiar with the Bay Area, it's part of Solano County and Contra Costa County. And that's the district. There's about 700,000 people in the district. And so anyway, just really trying to get the word out about the importance of empathy in the world. So yeah, Mike.
Are there other candidates running elsewhere?
Empathy movement candidates, you mean? No, this is the first. We're really kind of pioneering the way. It's like, the question is, how do we use the political mechanisms to promote empathy, to kind of get the word out about empathy, because there's so much polarization. The polarization is getting worse. And, I think it's really empathy that can sort of bridge those divides, and really make a cultural change. And it's a small group. It's very, very, it's just, you can see there's just a handful of us here. It's the same thing when we went to those demonstrations, like the political right would come to Berkeley, 200 or 300 people. And then the political left, Antifa, et cetera, would come out, 200, 300, 400 people. And it'd have these knockdown, drag out fights. And there'd be the empathy tent there with, 4 or 5 people, maybe 10 people. So that's sort of I think where we stand, culturally, that, the people who are wanting sort of this empathy movement and wanting to kind of bring people together is very small, it seems to me, or at least they're the ones who are activists, I would say empathy activists. It's this, relatively small group is what I'm seeing. So I don't know if that kind of, so I'm the only one that I know of who's actually kind of, this is, kind of, making this an issue and is a central political issue. So hopefully we're paving the way, too, for others. If we can model this, create a prototype of how to do this, hopefully other candidates eventually will kind of pick up on it. So, yeah. So any other questions about that before we go into an empathy circle? Okay, then what we do is we go into actually doing the process, and I think we should probably do 2 groups. What are we? So let me create the rooms. Does someone want to explain the process? I don't know, Anne, are you up for explaining how it works while I create the rooms?
Okay, put me on the spot there, but that's okay. You can always add bits in if I miss anything out. So in the empathy circle, basically, we have 3 roles, and we're all equal participants in the process. We take turns to be the speaker, and when we're the speaker, we choose who we would like in the circle to have as our active listener. And we speak for an allocated time. It will probably be 5 minutes or 4 or 5 minutes. The facilitator will let us know how long. And when we speak so that we feel that we are heard and understood. So we have a dialogue with our listener, where the listener will reflect back to us what they've heard us understood of what we're saying. So we speak in short sections so that the listener is able to reflect back in their own words or paraphrase what they've understood of what we're saying. And then we speak a little bit more and the person reflects back again. The other people in the circle will be the silent listeners, and their role is to hold the process, to pay attention to what is going on, and to maybe notice the difference between being in the role of the silent listener to being in the role of the active listener, and observe how it is. When the turn is complete, we have a practice of thanking our listener and letting them know that we feel heard or not. We actually can finish when we're told that the time is up. We finish off what we have to say, and to the point where we do feel satisfied that we've been heard, and then show an appreciation, maybe say, I feel heard or I feel fully heard. The person who has been the active listener then becomes a speaker, and they will have their turn and the process repeats. And so we go around the circle. The facilitator's role is very simply to, in addition to taking their turn, they will keep the time and ensure that we more or less stick to the process. Okay.
Okay,
So
so
back
here's
to
the
you,
question.
Edwin.
Okay,
Please add
thanks.
anything.
The best way is just to observe and learn by doing. And so I think, let's see, we have two groups then. Anne, do you want to facilitate the one? We'll have,
Okay.
and then Bill, the other. And
Okay.
we'll be here in the weight room. We'll be one room, and I'll be here with you. And so we have about an hour and 15 minutes, but hour and 20 minutes for the circle. Our topic is how might we build the empathy movement, and or whatever is alive for you. You can always talk about what's on your mind. You don't have to stick to the topic. And we're really looking at how do we build this empathy movement, and just what's on your mind around that, and or the campaign or empathy circles themselves. So and I'll send a heads up before we close. I give a 10-minute warning before we close, and we're going to go for the next hour and about an hour and a half, a little bit more than an hour and a half. So here we go into the rooms, and see you there.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. Oops, we have another person to admit. Do you want to admit?
All right, I'll let them in as well.
Okay. Okay.
But that'll be the last person, so.
Okay, gotcha. Okay. And we're going for what, 5 minutes, you think, or 4?
Yeah, 5, I think is probably
5.
good.
Okay. All right, so welcome. And we have a mix of people who've done the empathy circle before and who haven't done it. Hi, Sherry.
Oh, hi.
Started. You're in a breakout circle. So we'll model the process. And if you have any questions or something like that, you can. So I'll be the first listener. We'll have 5 minutes. I have a phone here with timer. And when the timer goes off, if you happen to hear it, it's a little piano riff. If you don't hear that, I have this very expensive handcrafted sign that I use to try to give you a cue. When your time is up, as said before, you don't have to cut yourself off in mid-sentence. Finish your thought, you'll get a last reflection, and then we'll move on. The key here is for new people is that we're really conditioned to respond, like even, with sympathy or agreement or something like that. And that's not what this is about. It's about reflecting. So it doesn't, if I correct you or something, it's not a criticism of you or your ideas, but it's actually just to keep us in that particular process. And it's kind of like what I say, and I'm kind of old, but like when you write the old year on your check, when it's like 2021, you keep on writing the old, you have to kind of train yourself to write the new year. And so anyway, it's no judgment on you. It's just the force of habit. And so this is a little different. So it's a little tricky sometimes. Okay. So I'll be happy to be the first listener. And who would like to start speaking? And then go on for 5 minutes. And okay, this is always the most awkward part of it.
Well, it shouldn't be me since I missed most of the intro. I'm out. Somebody else has to step
You're
forward.
off the hook. Okay, you're off the hook, Sherry. Okay. I always feel like Ben Stein in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I mean,
All right, I'll volunteer.
Thank you, Valerie.
Okay. Okay, so all right, what's alive for me? And how might we build the empathy movement? Yeah, I think it's just taking me a minute to sort of get into this.
Okay.
Just this morning in particular, not sort of since I entered the room, but and I think that's what's salient for me. Perhaps I'll talk about that, which is just that I think that there's a lot that we are living right now that arises in us in emotion, and that's something that we process on a daily basis.
So you took a little bit of time together, your kind of thoughts, and you said something happened this morning, which kind of it feels like you had to go through somewhat of a transition. I'm reading into that, into the circle. And then you're talking about the environment, the social environment we're living in right now, where there's just a lot of very strong emotions and things like that going on. I might have missed something there. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll just clarify it a little bit. So there's no particular thing that happened this morning. I think it's just more that what I'm sort of thinking about is how, in terms of this empathy and how we can try to provide experiences for people. I think that where we're coming from is the emotions that we're feeling on a daily basis that we are processing in every moment, and those emotions are different in every moment and in every day, and so that's something I think to really consider, when we sit down, we start talking, and it's like, but to really sort of to, I guess, appreciate within us and within others that there's always this emotional world that we're living in all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So I hope I get this right here. So you were talking about each person brings their own unique emotions and experiences and things like that, and that's happening all the time. And then overlaid with that, what I got the sense of is then how does empathy affect that? How does this practice affect it? And so I had those two sort of dynamics, our individual kind of psychological life, and then how empathy connects to that.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it, Bill. Thank you. And that's how I'm seeing this, sort of like there's the cerebral, and then there's the emotional, and then there's the physiological. And so when we're really sort of thinking about empathy, I think, and we've talked about this before, how important it is really to be embodied in that empathy and that recognition within our own bodies.
Yeah, so you're talking about empathy, and then there are three aspects of empathy that you're talking about: the cognitive, emotional, and the physiological. And and we have all of those. And when we embody empathy, empathy also is, how is that expressed cognitively, emotionally, and physiologically? And so it's I sense a searching for synthesis there.
Yeah, and certainly a recognition, because I think that there's a lot of, within this sort of dynamic that we're living in inside our minds, our emotions, our bodies, is the trauma, right? And like we've all experienced trauma, but then as we're sort of processing living in the world, there's always the outer environment that we're processing, and then there are sort of these extra difficult things that we're dealing with, particularly like right now over the past couple of years, and many different things. And so it's like, there's a lot of processing. There's a lot of processing of information. And so we're like cutting through like with a knife with this empathy. I don't want to use the word knife because that seems jagged and harsh. I just mean that we're trying to penetrate with empathy into this world that we're living in that has just all this dynamism going on.
That's the so I heard you talking about, the various stressors with the pandemic and the wars and the divides and things like that, that exist in our society, and referring back to building an empathy movement. And then how does empathy change that dynamic? The sense I got was something kind of, rock hard and stuck, and how does empathy, go in and start to loosen that up and allow us to process our traumas and our daily lives through the lens of empathy, and then hopefully getting to a better place.
That's great. Thank you so much, Bill. I feel fully heard.
Okay, great. Thanks. Okay. John, do you feel ready to listen?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, great. For me, empathy goes back to our essential nature. And when I was younger, much younger, there was a book called The Naked Ape by a guy by the name of Desmond Morris. And the premise of the book, as it was expressed, was that that we are just savages with a thin veneer of civilization. I'll stop there.
So to you, this comes back to a book called The Naked Ape that presupposes that we are essentially just savages with a naked veneer of society is the naked veneer. Do I have that right?
Yeah, or civilization. Basically manners, maybe.
Manners. There we go.
Yeah. And what I found in my work, and I was a special education teacher for almost 40 years, is that there is a natural need for communication. When a child acted out violently, we would meet afterwards and we would say, what's the communicative intent of that violent act? And it would seem like somebody just, kid just throws a book or a punch or whatever, and it seems like it's get away from me, but it wasn't. And when we did detective work, we found that they didn't get fed last night. They saw a violent act themselves. And when we could find that out, listen to them and validate that, their behavior changed.
So you were a special education teacher for 40 years, and often when you would come across potentially violent acts or outbursts, there was commonly an explanation that was not just the overt act itself, but some unheard communication that the child was trying to express and couldn't express it safely or appropriately, and that communication was that being heard was ultimately what they needed.
Right. And then, so I began to kind of, so I was dealing with a lot of anger and violence every day. And I began to flip my perception. And so one could say, scratch, somebody and there's some angry person there. But what I started to understand is that our natural state is empathy. Our natural state is to be part of a community. And when that doesn't happen, I think that's actually hardwired. And when that doesn't happen, then we get upset and we act out. So I'll stop there.
So in experiencing many of these violent outbursts day in and day out, it changed your perspective to understand it as empathy rather than being a a skill to build. It's more like reverting back to the way that we're meant to, the way that we're meant to commune. We're meant to share with one another and listen to one another. And when we don't feel heard by the tribe or by the group, then that's what heightens the discomfort, I guess, or
Sure.
the disconnect, and leads to the outburst.
Yeah, and I believe there's evolutionary, evidence to back this up, in the sense that really human beings have been around, even proto-humans, for about 4 million years. For 3 million, we were not the top dog in the animal world. And so therefore, our very survival was dependent upon really effective communication. And so that's what we're really conditioned to do, rather than, just going wild, because a wild person, one wild person in nature will not last very long. That's my time.
So you note that humans have been around for about 4 million years, and for the vast majority of that, we've had to band together for survival, and it evolved in a way to cooperate versus going out on our own, just because that wouldn't last very long.
Thanks, John. I feel fully heard.
So do I go next, or do
you go next? Yeah, and then pick a listener.
Okay, Sherry, would you like to be my listener?
I will try. I missed a little bit of the intro, but I think that I'm picking up on, we're just trying to practice active listening, respond to the comments that the individual is putting out, and not try to counter them.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. So the downside to active listening is I didn't get to think about what I was going to say. Well, so going a little off the cuff. All right. The question is, how will we build the empathy movement? So maybe I'll talk about what led me here. My wife has attended a few of these, and so I know a little bit about it. And she encouraged, in that background, I started this in an exercise with a men's group I'm in. I realized we were essentially practicing an empathy circle. This might just have a little more structure to it. And so here to get more familiar with that structure, and because I from what I know to this point, I see the value in, as in the intro, Edwin kind of mentioned, that making this a movement, and I agree with that mission. So that's what brought me here. I'll stop there.
Okay. So you've kind of inadvertently stumbled across how empathy plays a significant role in bridging divides, and you're hoping that you can become more proficient in that skill set, is what I think I'm hearing.
Exactly right. And not only have I seen how it can be a benefit, but I think what I really recognize is how the lack of empathy leads to many of the problems that we experience, and many of the disconnects, how we go through this disconnected world, I guess, disconnected from one another. And is related to what Bill said, evolutionarily and tribally, and for civilization to have a successful civilization, I think we need to be more connected. And so how to make it more successful, I think, is to look for opportunities to insert the practice. And so that's kind of what got my wheels turning, was like, I could have an empathy circle for my immediate family, or my extended family, or at work, or in community organizations, or in political organizations, or there's so many benefits out there that if people had the chance to show up and be heard, then many of the emotional outbursts, like they may not be actually hitting people or throwing books or things, but the way that we tend to maybe more subtly outburst or suffer could be minimized.
Oh, well, those were some pretty deep thoughts, and I have to admit that they sent me off on a tangent here and there with my own struggles. I think similar struggles. You are saying that perhaps a more structured approach to building empathy, and I guess I'm going to interject some of my own struggles, understanding what empathy should look like from all parties, because, oh, I'm not supposed to, okay. I think that there's a lot of validity to trying to make empathy a more structured approach in as many people's lives as we can. Sorry, I don't, that's my, how well did I do or badly did I do?
I would just add that, yeah, so I see the value in finding other places in my and sort of the grander we in our interpersonal connections to find room for empathy, and maybe it's just about creating the space and the practice for that to happen. Like Bill said, it's kind of our natural state. If we can make the room for our natural state to emerge.
I think that, yes, we're in agreement that it is a natural state to quite an extent. I think there are human failings that maybe still complicate things. But yes, I think I'm still hearing that you are looking for maybe trying to create more empathetic opportunities in every line available to us: work, home, extended family that may make that difficult, etc.
Yeah, that's right. And that was my answer to how we build the movement. So that's why I brought that stuff up. I will say that, and I don't know if this is a response to, I think, to what you were getting at, but something that I struggle with this concept of empathy circle, and as Edwin described it, kind of mediating between extreme poles, is that I worry that it sort of lends validity or equal validity to every viewpoint. And I don't feel that way. Maybe I should, but I don't. So that's just a hurdle that I think maybe comes with practice that is on my mind.
Okay, I'll just kind of pause here and I'll give you a little feedback, Sherry. So you're a good listener, okay? I can tell that. And nothing you did was really wrong, but in the process, we separate our reaction. When your turn to speak, which will be now, the next person, then you could respond if you wish. But it's really, so it's actually a practice or a discipline just to listen to what the person said and to respond to what John said. Of course, I'm breaking the rules right now too, so I'll be by doing this. So, but to respond to what John said, empathy, and it does not mean agreement. So the only thing that we're really implying when we're listening to someone is that we're giving them validity as a human being, not necessarily agreeing with their view. And from that basis, there could possibly be, dialogue. As Edwin said, this is a first step. Did that make things clear for you? Okay.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, okay. All right, Sherry. So it's your turn to talk and pick a listener, and off we go.
I haven't gone yet, so if you want to pick me.
Okay, and I'm sorry, that Edwin, okay.
I'm listening. Yep.
All right, so I'm I'm being asked to provide my input on how I think we can build the empathy movement.
So you're curious if if you're being asked how to create the empathy movement. So you just have you're wondering if that's what your role task is.
Yes, you are correct. I have been on the empathy train with we all need to be doing unto others as you would have done unto you for decades. And I feel like, and I have someone who, if I try to have any discussion with, claims to be an empathetic or an empath, and yet I can't get them on the same page with me on how do we, what does one and treating one another as we would like to be treated look like. And I do feel like that empath's argument has always been everybody's perspective is valid. And I find that very difficult to work with.
Okay, so what I was hearing there is that you've believed in treat others as you would like to be treated. So you've valued that empathic approach, and there's someone that you have talked with. It sounds like they're not really hearing you and understanding you. You're seeing yourselves as empaths. And so you're kind of struggling, sounds like, in that relationship. And that there's also this aspect of everyone having a valid point. You're not so sure about that, or I'm not sure if I quite got that, but that's the essence.
Yes, I think that you did hear me correctly or describe it correctly, that I have found that is, I think, one of the more frustrating aspects of creating an empath circle.
So you've had some frustrations in creating this empathic circle that says, yeah, just feeling that sense of frustration.
Yes. And I'm hoping that an official empath organization will help us get past some of those things that arise when we don't always agree on what being empathetic looks like.
Okay, so that you're hoping that you've had these struggles with, sounds like, in these dialogues with empathy, and you're hoping that having a more like this organization or more structured approach might be a way of overcoming those disagreements and frustrations of really communicating with people.
Yes. So are you someone who has had experience with this, and do you feel like you found some answers to that struggle, or do you not find that being a struggle for you?
Yeah, so you're looking for solutions of how to address this, and you're wondering if I have come across this and if I have solutions for addressing those problems.
Yeah, you're really good at this. I feel heard.
Yeah, you're feeling really good. Feel really heard.
Okay, you do have a minute and a half if you want more time, but if you're done for now, that's fine too.
I think I'm done. Sorry,
Okay.
I missed a lot of the intro and may not be appropriately working through what we're supposed to be working through.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
You don't-
You just pick it up as we go. So I'll speak to Valerie. Sorry.
Hi, Edwin.
Right. Yeah, it's in regular discussions, when people are just talking without a clear set of structure and agreement, there's a lot of miscommunication and happens. And so that's very typical for, yeah.
Yeah, so you're clarifying that this, in typical conversation, the way we go back and forth without structure, sometimes there can just be sort of a lot of cross confusion or something. That's just the way it goes.
Yeah, and I would say there's structure. Every conversation has a structure. It's just is a structure that whoever's the loudest gets the attention, whoever's the most aggressive gets the attention, or so there is a structure there, but it's not. Yeah, I think that what we're doing here is we're offering a more fair, effective structure.
That's very insightful. So what you're saying is that it's not that typical conversations are unstructured or without structure. they have their own structure. It's just that it's not the empathy structure, right? You know, sometimes it's someone who speaks the loudest or who's the dominant, and there's whoever's dominant, submissive, whoever's, you know, whatever it is. So that's the difference between the empathy structure versus other typical types of structures of communication.
Yeah, so this is almost like training wheels. What we're doing here is relational training wheels. Like if you do this for a lot, you know, just kind of practice this listening, after, you know, several hours or so, you don't even need it anymore because everybody's sort of into the mindset. But it's like we need a lot of practice. I think that the empathy circle is a really good practice for, you know, setting aside your own thoughts and really focusing and putting a focus on the listening aspect of it.
Right. So what you're emphasizing is that there's a lot of practice that goes into how we use this method, and that if we keep on using it after some time, you just sort of get into the mindset with the people around you, so that the structure versus the typical way we ordinarily talk, that habit that is formed out there, that mindset that is formed. Conversely, it's this habit gets formed as well. It's just that then we go bouncing back into our world. But the more we do it, the more we practice, you know, the more this sort of gets set in, and practice is what's really important.
Yeah, exactly. And it's yeah, there's also what happens. I'm kind of responding to what Sherry, you know, question, you know, the conflict that happens is someone will do all the listening. This happens often. You become the person that's doing all the listening. It's like, hey, I want to turn to be heard too. And then you try to say something and they just talk over you, right? And it's like, well, I'm not going to listen anymore because you're not listening to me. So it just creates more frustrations. Whereas the empathy circle, it's like we have time turns. Everybody gets heard. So the structure is really kind of helping model sort of an empathic way of being, where everybody gets heard and to their satisfaction.
Right. So the structure is really about being heard, allowing a space for people to be heard, and also the speaking part. Yes, but it's an exchange where you know that you're going to be heard, and that you're also going to get an opportunity to hear someone else in a way that we don't typically hear people. So it's a very interesting structure and dynamic that is not typical of the usual conversation, where sometimes you know, one person ends up doing all the talking and another person ends up doing all the listening.
Yeah, I know for myself in groups, like before I did the empathy circle, I'd always find it hard to sort of step in at the right point, you know, without it being disruptive. And then I would kind of hold back and I'd get more frustrated because I'm not saying anything, and that frustration builds. And then when I do step in, it comes up in with all this aggression, right? And then it just creates this, you know, little chaos. So I just found that the empathy circle just really models, you know, it kind of addresses that aspect too. So I find it easy. When it's my turn, it's my turn. I don't have to fight to be heard. You know, it's going to come around eventually to me. So that's another dynamic that it kind of helps address.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is that you're picking up on just all kinds of different sort of benefits that are part of this structure. Part of it is not sort of having to struggle and fight for when do I get my chance to be heard. And that also allows us then that when we are listening to be fully present, because we're not thinking about the next thing we're going to say, which often happens to people in this exercise. You don't have anything to say when it comes to your turn because you're so busy listening. And so there's that anxiety gets brought down, and you get to participate in a sort of more holistic way.
I feel fully heard. Thank you, Valerie.
Thank you, Edwin. Okay. John, would you hear me, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. So I am feeling a lot of passion around this topic of empathy, and I think that it is in me really evoked a lot, like it's just like a myriad of ways in which we can exercise empathy.
So you're feeling very passionate about this topic, and seems to have inspired a lot of ideas as to how to incorporate it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting because I feel like suddenly that little ego me that was always present, even though I've always considered myself to be an empathic person, but we all have this sort of ego thing, and that's sort of what Edwin was just talking about, that sort of like, when do I get to be heard? You know, and Bill talks a lot about, you know, the community and the exchange and the sympathy and the necessity for that. And what I'm really finding is that it's opening up a space for me finally to really to fully embrace what it means to be an empathic person in my own body, and then towards other people.
So you've always felt like a empathic person, but I think what you appreciate about the practice is that it opens a space for that to really come out, and to separate the ego side from the more empathic communal side of your consciousness.
I mean, like when Edwin was talking about the, you know, how the struggle for when do I get to be heard, that's what I recognized in myself, is that how can I fully be heard when I'm always wondering, am I ever going to get a chance? Am I ever going to get an opportunity in this conversation? Or is he just relishing the fact that he's finally got someone to listen to him, and I'm just going to sit here like, you know, a little Barbie doll and just listen to him the whole time? What I found is that this exercise has actually helped me to be also more assertive about having conversations in this empathic way.
So you really empathized with Edwin's experience of a typical group dynamic, where it's easy to feel that you won't be able to get what you want to say out, and you may not be heard at all because there is no structure. But with a structure where you know that you're going to have equal time to share, it's making you a better communicator as well as a better listener.
Yeah, because then the ego just gets out of the way. It's like when we don't empathize with each other, the ego just gets fueled.
Yeah, because having that structure and the equal fair time and attention allows the ego to take a back seat, and it allows you to thrive.
Mm-hmm. Especially as when I get into it, and the more I'm practicing, and that's why I practice so much, coming to all the empathy events is because, or the empathy sessions, is because I find that I'm being more enriched by the experience, and so I'm feeling less anxiety, less wanting, like my ego doesn't want to, like it just doesn't feel like it needs to fight to be seen.
So the ego taking a back seat is sort of pacified that it doesn't need to be as assertive, because doing the practice in itself creates the conditions where you can be more, it's more safe. It's more safe to be genuine, and for it to naturally come out. You don't have to be as vigilant. Am I hearing that correctly?
Yeah, it's like it's very natural to want to be heard, right? So I have this like guilt-free, like in other circumstances I'd be like feeling guilty because like I want to say something, but then I feel like I'm not fully listening, something like that. Whereas like in this method, then I don't have to worry about feeling guilty for something that's natural.
And so you're saying there's actually some guilt around not being fully present in listening and thinking about your response, and in being in the structured environment and in the practice relieves you from that guilt.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, yeah, I guess that's pretty close. Thank you very much, John.
You're welcome.
Definitely heard.
All right, Bill, would you like to?
Sure, I'll be happy to listen.
Would you happy to listen? Okay. I really resonate with the idea, or I like the idea of this being a practice, and it's not necessarily a practice for, it is skill building for future, but I think as I've heard from a few different people, that the practice itself is beneficial, because it creates the level of communication necessary to hear and be heard.
So you kind of talked about the practice is sort of skill building, but what you kind of talked about is that actually, yes, it can do that. However, the benefit can be experienced right in the circle where it's happening. So the experience in the circle itself starts to have an effect. And please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right. And that experience of being heard and hearing others, I think is how we build the movement. More people experiencing it and realizing the benefit of it, or realizing, I guess, kind of like I said before, that the lack of empathy is the source of a lot of underlying disagreements or suffering.
Right. So you're thinking about building the movement, and the way to build the movement is to give people the experience of being heard. And that's that. And there was another part that I may have, missed. The second point.
Yeah, I think that's the gist of it.
Okay.
So another aspect of this is I'm in a bit of a career change phase, and basically, I guess maybe what I'm realizing, that like the lack of empathy in our interpersonal relationships leads to all these issues and polarization and just kind of ugliness in the world. But I think also that how disconnected we're expected to be in our livelihood, and many of our livelihoods. I can't speak for everybody, in my own, but for it to that introducing more connection into your work life is kind of the key to having benefits in your daily life. So I'm looking for opportunities to do that.
Yeah. So you're seeing the benefits of empathy in your personal life, your work life, and all others as aspects of building the movement. And right now you're going through a job change. So, and again, this is me inferring. So there's a little bit, you have to reestablish what you had in your old job. You have to reestablish those lines of communication. And you're looking to do that in using empathy as a way to basically get into a more effective, empathic, and collaborative work situation.
Exactly. I'm thinking about this from the perspective of as being a more empathic manager, being a more empathic coworker, being a more empathic client and vendor, and the different relationships that I have in my professional life, how they could all be better served with clearer communication through empathy.
So you're talking about various roles, I assume, that you've had in your work life. and you're reflecting on how empathy, infused into those relationships and communications could make things much more effective and supportive.
And I'm recognizing that that's not the norm. It's not the way the corporate business is really done. So it does feel a bit like uncharted territory.
Yeah, and you realize that this sort of empathic type of this value is not the dominant paradigm in corporate, in life, and so you're realizing that bringing that in is kind of blowing against the wind a bit.
Exactly. I feel fully heard.
Okay, great. All right, Sherry, you ready?
Yes, I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Yeah. One of the things that I've kind of, gotten from this group is, some of us know each other, some of us don't, but how empathy is, is really important to all of us. And so by inference, I would assume that it's important to many, many human beings. I'll stop there.
So I think you're saying that it appears from the makeup of this group that there's a lot of agreement that being empathetic is kind of a missing component and is very important. It would seem like it's the natural or the norm. Is that what I'm hearing, or is that what you're saying?
That's great. Yeah, no, that's fine. And I'll take John's example in business and how the quote unquote corporate model without empathy is not effective. In other words, what I'm trying to say is they're very practical effects of empathy. I'll stop there.
Very practical effects of empathy. Well, so you just matched, there's very practical effects of empathy with, there doesn't seem to be much empathy in the corporate environment. So I'm trying to mesh those two together. Can you elaborate?
Sure. So, you got that right. What I'm saying is that there's a disconnect between the corporate culture and then an empathic culture. However, if business is understood, and some do, empathic communications is the basis of good sales, effective teamwork, flexibility in the workplace. All these sorts of things are benefited when people have a feeling of trust and open communication. And I'll stop there.
So I think I'm hearing that corporations do not seem to realize all the multiple benefits of having empathy or acting empathetically in the corporate environment. And it would seem like it would be to their benefit to become more aware of that.
Yeah, right.
Is that more or less what you?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
And there are two aspects to that. First of all, embodying empathy increases and breaks down barriers to relationships. So that's what when you're trying to sell something, if I'm trying to sell something to you, you have to trust me in some way, right? You have to say, oh, this is a good product. This is a good product. I'll stop there.
Well, at the risk of kind of just parroting what you said,
okay,
they need to be more empathetic, or they need to realize that breaks down the barriers that maybe there's not enough awareness of those barriers that are out there.
Right. And then the next thing is in a broader sense, we have to change the values. money and the pursuit of money by itself as an abstract concept is not working for us. I'll stop there.
So, yeah, the value system in corporate America really seems to need rethinking. And I think you're wondering or suggesting, how do we accomplish that?
Right. So Herbert Hoover once said famously, just before the Big Depression, the business of America is business. And what I would say is that the business of America is Americans.
So I think I'm hearing that we need to help change the value system of America and corporate America, probably specifically, to focus more on what money is supposed to be buying us, which
Right.
is healthier people and healthier relationships.
Thank you, Sherry. I feel fully heard. That was great. Thank you so much. It's your turn.
Oh, it's my turn. I
Yeah.
guess I'm going to do Edwin again if we're trying to include everybody, yes?
You can
Sure.
mix it up if you like. It's up to you.
Valerie did such a good job of expressing things. I'm going to put her to the test if Edwin doesn't mind. How are you doing, Valerie? Are you there?
Hi, thank you. Yes, I'm here to listen.
Oh, rats. I thought I had something in mind that I wanted to bring up, and I may have lost it.
Take your time.
Rats. Okay, I think I recall it. I am frustrated by, it seems like the only people willing to participate in our empathy circles are the ones who are already practicing empathy.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you're frustrated because it's the singing to the choir situation where the people who are participating in these types of empathy circles are people who are already interested in practicing empathy.
Yes. I'm hoping that not only understanding and valuing and working on my active listening skills, as well as, I don't know, using what does it look like when everybody's treating each other the way they want to be treated? I'm hoping that I don't know, at least if we don't, even if we do only have the people who are already practicing empathy in these circles, at least maybe we will be able to come to some, I don't know, standards or approaches, shared knowledge, tips and techniques that will help us draw more people into this movement. I'll stop there.
Okay, so what I'm hearing that you're saying is that there is perhaps some benefit, after all, to people who are inclined towards practicing empathy, deepening their practice, and what are the residual effects, the potential residual effects of that? Like, that is something that you're seeing as a positive.
Yes. I do really feel strongly about following up with what both Bill and John were talking about. It is corporate America, which is what everybody's economic well-being hinges upon, where we have to make that change, and we need to have some specific guidance and breakthroughs in how we get that word out and that process in place. I do think that more and more managers and workers are learning it and practicing it in the forms of, I think I actually had active listening training in corporate America. I just don't see how, I guess maybe the missing component is people aren't practicing what they preach. I'll stop there.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that that there's this process that's very, very necessary that you're seeing. You're agreeing with Bill's sentiments and John that corporate America, because of this gargantuan system under which and within which we are all functioning, this economic wheel that we're all a part of, that wheel in itself has a lot of affect in our lives. And so the way that it's sort of spinning around is something that we need to look at. The changes that need to happen to the way that we practice business and our involvement in it and so forth is something that you feel is imperative. And you're not sure exactly, because of this great need that we all seem to sort of resonate with and recognize, you're not sure what the missing piece is to bridge that for people to get on board and to make this change that just seems so intuitive.
Yes, exactly. I'm hoping that this empathy circle will and the empathy movement will help us and me have some more answers to, again, it's how do we agree on what being properly, or I guess fairly empathetic to all the different stakeholders is a term that I've come familiar with, hopefully. And I think of stakeholders, I guess I first thought of that term in the business environment, but I even look at politics now in terms of stakeholder. And I even look at like family, extended family in terms of, you know, the different perspectives of stakeholders. How do we get the balance of the different stakeholders properly heard and consolidated?
Mm-hmm. So what I'm really hearing from you, Sherry, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that what I'm really hearing is that you are saying that that as a person who's drawn towards empathy, and those of us who are drawn towards empathy, that you're really recognizing through this process that we're having right now that there is discovery. There's discovery that happens through the process in terms of how can we make these changes, what ideas can I come up with, what areas can this empathy method really touch and affect. So that's what I'm hearing, is that this is part of the process for you, is that you're actually recognizing how the empathy is actually functioning in terms of being able to answer those very big questions.
Yes, thank you. I feel heard.
Thank you. Sometimes we go out on a little bit of a stretch on a limb to try to interpret. So hopefully that was okay. Okay. Let's see. Bill, would you listen to me, please?
Sure, listening.
Thank you. Okay. So yeah, I think there's a lot about empathy that I really find is about bringing out what is genuine.
So you're thinking about empathy, and one way you kind of define it yourself or experience is bringing out what is genuine.
Yeah. For instance, when I was talking to John at the very end there, I feel like I just need to clarify what I meant, because I didn't so much mean that I didn't have in terms of the guilt. It wasn't so much that I wasn't listening, that was where my guilt was, because I do listen. My guilt was that I actually wanted to be heard. And so I just wanted to clarify that, because I feel that that's more sort of like genuine to what I was really thinking.
So you want to clarify something that you said at the last, when your last speaking term, when you were talking to John. And the clarification you wanted to make is that you didn't feel guilt about your listening. You could listen, and that was fine. But you felt guilt at your frustration and not being heard yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think what's like, in terms of being genuine, I think that's what's missing in terms of the whole conversation around corporate, but also like how does that corporate influence other areas, and some of I'm very passionate about ageism, because we don't talk about it enough. And I find that the lack of genuine interaction with people who have been on the planet for longer is sort of like this this relationship where the longer they've been on the planet, the less empathy we have.
So you were talking about, and I'm not quite sure I've got everything here, but you were talking about, well, corporate America and sort of, the lack of empathy, or just a certain lack of empathy. But basically, you were talking about ageism, and you're talking about that as we grow older, we're heard much less, whereas things used to be different.
Yeah, and really what I'm tying in there is that the systems, like I've talked about this before, but like how the way that we function in our corporate sort of environment, how that affects our relationships in terms of how we see people on this sort of treadmill.
Yeah. So essentially, the corporate culture, which encourages us to constantly be on a somewhat of a treadmill, affects our perceptions and our relationships with in our whole lives, our personal relationships, etc.
Yeah, and so it's that lack of being genuine, the lack of really being able to see a person who is there behind the shell, which is really what we are. We're a shell of biological processes, but what's inside, that's what's important. And that's what I feel like empathy is really important for, is that genuine connection with another human being.
So as I sense it, you're making a distinction between, well, it's very important to be genuine. And that is contrasted in corporate America, let's say, with the roles that we have to. So we have to, in corporate America, if you're the CEO, you have to be strong, you have to do this, and that's the role in which you need to project. But that's not necessarily genuine. And so there needs to be a transition where our authentic selves, we are allowed to express our authentic selves, and that should be more accepted.
Exactly. Yeah. I just find that we really have designed our world away from seeing ourselves in another person, and therefore seeing the other person in us.
Right. So you're saying that sort of like the fragmentation of society, or the overly rigid roles that we have, are an impediment to seeing our relationships with others, seeing ourselves in others, and seeing them in ourselves, which would then go to make an authentic or more functional communication relationship.
Yes, exactly. I like the word functional. Thank you, Bill. I feel fully heard.
Sure. Okay. I'll talk to Edwin.
Listening.
We were talking about, the empathy circle, and we're talking about how people experience it. And that's good, I've been working with you for 4 or 5 years now, and the response has been great. But there seems to be, we sometimes question, well, why isn't it spreading? If it's so great, why isn't it spreading more quickly?
Yeah, you and I have worked together for 4 or 5 years, and people say, hey, this is really great. But you're wondering, it's like, we actually come up with why isn't it spreading more? The question, why isn't it spreading more quickly?
Yeah, and I think that goes to a little bit of what we talk about corporate culture or our consumerism, is that, oh, I've done the empathy circle, I've done that, I can put that on the shelf, and go on to the next thing. I'll stop there.
So maybe part of it is people think, well, I've done the circle, I've done it, put it on the shelf, that's it. And they don't think of the longer term, bigger picture.
Yeah. And so what we've tried to reframe it is it's almost like exercise. You might have been, done a lot of exercise, years ago in your youth, and it does have some benefits, but you still have to do it to continue to get the benefits of the exercise.
Yeah. So one way to frame it is that it's not like you just do the exercise, you put it once and you put it on the shelf. The exercise is an ongoing process, and we're trying to frame it that this has to be an ongoing practice or exercise, or maybe even movement. Right.
And then the part of understanding empathy is that, as Valerie talked about, she talked about a cognitive understanding, an emotional understanding, and a physiological understanding. And so basically what we're conditioned to do is just work on the cognitive understanding of empathy.
So there's different sort of levels of relating to empathy, and there's this real felt bodily experience of it, and there's just a conceptual cognitive one, and generally the cognitive is what's valued.
Right. And what I find is the benefit of the empathy circle is that it allows you to experience, it's experiential. And so you get different perspectives, and that serves the cognitive. You get different connections with people, that serves the emotional. And you actually start to feel in your body what empathy and being heard feels like, and that's the physiological. So it helps broaden our understanding of empathy past just a cognitive understanding.
So you're really just laying out what a real benefit of the empathy circle is, that it's just not this intellectual cognitive understanding of it. It's really integrating the cognitive and emotional and sort of multidimensional aspects of empathy. So it's a real benefit of the practice.
Right. But nevertheless, we always go back to the cognitive. And I'll tell a short story. I've told you before, Edwin, you've heard this, but about Einstein and why. And so Einstein he was a little boy at the time, and Einstein would come down in the morning and he constantly complained about how he hated shaving. I'll stop there.
So you want to telling a story about Einstein, that he would come down and just say he hated shaving. He constantly talked about how he hated it.
Right. So for Christmas, the boy bought him a can of shaving cream. And Einstein came down and he goes, "Oh, this is wonderful."
So Einstein, somebody gave him a whole can of shaving cream, and he came down and he was like saying, "Hey, this is really wonderful."
Right. And then he used the shaving cream every day till he used the can up, and he never bought another can of shaving cream the rest of his life.
So he just used it up and then never bought another can of it for the rest of his life.
And yeah, and the analogy I make is that people who think, "Oh, I've done empathy, I can put it aside," and that's the misconception. And then I'm done. Thank you.
Yeah, so you're trying to illustrate it in a humorous way that, you got to keep shaving every day to, we just shaving once isn't going to get rid of the the hairs on you. In the same way with empathy circles, you got to keep practicing.
Thanks, Edwin. I feel fully.
Okay, thanks. I'll speak to John then.
Listening.
Yeah, so kind of made one note. I mean, well, actually, I just want to go back to what Valerie was saying is I do think that, for creating this culture of empathy and an empathy movement, that openness and transparency is central to that, because the more open and transparent we are, the deeper we can sense into and feel into each other's experience. So I see that as really important too.
You wanted to echo what Valerie said or expand on it, that openness and transparency are sort of critical in building the empathic connection.
And what I find is that the empathy circle itself, because everyone gets heard and you develop a sense of trust, slowly, oh, I will be heard. I don't have to compete. So people relax. And as they become more trusting, I think people become more open and transparent. So that's another benefit of the empathy circle, is that trust building, which leads to more openness and transparency, which creates deeper relationships.
So what I'm hearing you saying is sort of self-fulfilling, in that the openness and transparency and the boundaries or the structure of the circle creates this trust that you will be heard, which allows for more openness and transparency.
And then the other thing is kind of addressing what you were saying about empathy in business and corporations. That's why I'm running for Congress here in this district, which is north of Berkeley, and it's to bring this message into the political sphere. So I think if we can bring this into this political sphere, that it could trickle down, through the rest of the culture.
So relating back to what I said about the lack of empathy in corporate culture, that's your main motivation for running for Congress, is to bring empathy to the political sphere, because you see that having a broader impact on, assuming through policy and regulations and things that will spread the benefits.
But also to model it. So the first thing I did is I reached out to the other candidates and I invited them to an empathy circle. So there's 5 candidates and 3 of us took part in an empathy circle. So we actually modeled how to have constructive dialogue. And the topic was, how do we bridge our social and political divides in our communities and country? So it's one way of sort of bringing that, this message, this movement into the political sphere.
So beyond just being theoretical, you wanted to model it, and you did so by inviting all the other candidates. And out of the 5, 3 showed up and participated in an empathy circle with a question around bridging our social and political divides.
Mm-hmm. And so the next thing would be is we move into the political sphere, is I'd like to get like Fox News, and MSNBC, get Rachel Maddow and Hannity together into an empathy circle, and get these different, people together and have them model the process, as well as reaching out to, actually congressional representatives to do empathy circles, Republicans and Democrats. So if we can sort of model this at this higher level, national level political debate, I think that would really help get the word out. Yeah.
So you're saying that one of the best ways to get the word out would be like very high profile people who disagree, who seem very far apart, and showing how it could benefit them as a model for others to get behind. So whether that be people in the infotainment industry or actual politicians, that they could have a big audience and have a lot of impact.
Yeah, and then the other is this candidate statement, we have a candidate statement. I'm in my candidate statement, you get 250 words. I talked about the empathy circle, and, have a link to my website, which has, information about the empathy circle there. So that is going to go out to 411,000 voters in the district. So we'll see what happens when what impact that has.
So as part of the the election process, you got to build a candidate statement, and you took that opportunity to talk about empathy and empathy circles and link to your the appropriate websites. And that statement is going out to 411,000 voters out of, I think you said, about 700,000 people in the district. So that's a pretty good representation of people in your area.
Yeah, so that's for, but I think we need I'm seeing that we really need an identity of a movement, behind it, and people committed to this movement, and people saying, this is what I'm part of, and feel that they're part of this larger movement. It's not just, hey, this is Empathy Circle, some little process. The Empathy Circle is really a gateway to a deeper, I guess, philosophical, emotional way of being, a whole culture. So it's just the first steps to that cultural transformation.
So you're saying that the introduction to the Empathy Circle is the first step to a larger transformation in how I'm inferring how we relate to one another, how we understand one another, and how that could have large ripple effects in other aspects of their lives outside of the Empathy Circle.
Yeah, cultural transformation is
cultural transformation.
I feel heard. Mm-hmm.
All right, I will. Well, can you hear that in the background? I'm going to shut my door real quick.
Okay.
It's lunchtime and the kids are out of sorts. Okay. Valerie, do you want to listen? I don't know who's up.
Hey,
That's
John.
fine.
Yeah.
So hearing what the others have said, in addition and in response to what I said, has gotten my ideas sort of flowing, which I guess is the purpose here. I really liked Bill's Hoover quote. That was because I think that is the problem, and what I see is a transformation, and I agree that Bill said that some corporations are doing it. There is some cultural changes happening, but I think the key, and I think this aligns with Edwin's larger cultural change too, is that for people to see for the benefits of empathy and deeper communication to be valued. I guess I'll stop there.
Okay, so I'm just going to try to get that all. So what you're appreciating is what Edwin and what Bill have said with regard to corporate and political issues that we need to deal with when it comes to empathy. And so what you're seeing is that you liked the Hoover quote that Bill talked about, but also what you're seeing in terms of actually implementing this, the way that Edwin was expressing is resonating with you.
Yeah, and I would clarify that Bill's comment and Edwin's comment kind of helped me think about clarify, I guess, what is holding us back from being successful. And I think that it is how we measure success. And when we measure success by dollars and cents only, then that's why even going through a process like this, you're able to just pull it out, put it on the shelf and put it away, because you're not measuring success against the benefits of the empathy circle. Does that make sense?
So what you're saying is that what Bill and Edwin have shared here today is helping for you to clarify what the problem is, in terms of, why don't we have empathy as a priority, and also to clarify that we ought to have empathy as a priority,
Yeah, and why I sort of expanding on my thought of it, feels like we're pushing against the wind, or that it's a struggle to go against the grain of the culture. And the reason that is because the culture doesn't look at the right metrics, and Bill named a few of them. I would expand it to like employee satisfaction and employee retention, and burnout, like burnout rates and resignations, and all of these signs that simply doing this sort of robotic, cold, isolated way of conducting business is may have negative drawbacks despite them being profitable. I'll stop there.
right. So what I'm hearing is that the clarification that you're getting is that the way that we measure the metrics that we use to measure and sort of measure success is not aligned with what really matters, which is what we talk about, like in the sense of using the empathy method, because the empathy method brings out these other aspects that you're saying are much more important, that really ought to be how metrics are measured, which Bill did a really good job of highlighting some of the areas, such as employee turnover, satisfaction, chronic stress, these types of things. And that if we're not looking at those particular measures, then we're actually misguided in the way that we move forward our businesses and so forth, because we could do it in a much better way.
Yeah, there's I think that there's room for growth, and I liked what Edwin said about modeling it. We're gonna like how do you, it's not enough to just talk about it, you model it, and then you can reap the benefits of having modeled it, and that's kind of how you can demonstrate the value to others, that it is worth considering other performance indicators beyond the way things have always been done.
So what I'm hearing is that one of the ways that we can sort of look at the changing things and doing things differently is really emphasizing what Edwin's talking about in terms of modeling. So modeling the empathy practice, the method, because in that way, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but what I'm hearing is what you're saying is that if we're modeling it in ourselves, the way that we embody empathy practice, let's say with someone who is unfamiliar with it and they're not part of our empathy sessions, that in our workplace, for instance, that if we're modeling it, they can actually see that this person is operating a little bit differently, and that perhaps that could open an opportunity to explore, you know, what empathy is all about and why is that person sort of modeling a little bit differently.
Yes, thank you. I feel heard.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure if that was a bit of a rich interpretation of what you said.
Good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Sherry, would you please listen?
You bet.
Thank you. Okay, I'm just gonna take a second.
Sure.
So I guess I will talk about something that is alive for me right now. So I'm a mature student at philosophy, and I just finished one of my semesters. And so as a mature student, it's finding this sort of interesting reactions that I've gotten during my undergrad experience.
So I think I'm hearing that you're, when you say mature, non-traditional, you're not like freshly become an adult and maybe have a little more experience than most of the other students. And you just finished a semester and you're dealing with something from the semester, trying to process through it, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's really been sort of an ongoing theme throughout my undergrad sort of experience, and I'm almost at the end. I've just got a few more semesters to go. But really, like, for instance, this one person that I told that I was, like, when I first started at university, and I told him that I'm going to university, and he said, "You're doing it backwards."
So it was probably a younger student that told you that you were doing something backwards. And I imagine that probably was rather frustrating, to say the least.
Yeah, no, it wasn't a younger student. In fact, he's the same sort of range as I am. He's a friend of mine, but he went to university in his early 20s. And so for him, it's very much like this linear path of, you know, whatever, grade school, elementary school, high school, college, university, job, family, retirement, and death, right? Like it's like this conveyor belt mentality.
So to many people, there is, and apparently this friend of yours, you follow a strict set of events, and he implied that you did not follow that strict set of events, and that bothered you a little bit.
Well, yeah, it implies that it's so easy. What I'm observing is this is just, I mean, one instance, right? We can all probably think of something that this is one instance in which it is just so easy to negate people based on this model, this linear timeline model, and how many people get negated because of where they are at on that model. Even if they did university in their 20s, how much money are you making by the time you're in your 30s? What do you have? What assets do you have? Are you married? Do you have a family? Are, you know, like it's all this sort of this bond that we have, not only to a timeline, but how that interacts with the corporate world and how that feeds down into the timeline.
So you're really pressing me to think on my feet, or this exercise is, but I thought I might try to interject what one of the other discussions was with measures of success. I think I'm hearing that even in our personal lives, we talked about where that was happening in corporate America quite a bit, but even in our personal lives, we have these measures of success is maybe one of the issues that are so easily to cause, like if they get brought up in the wrong way, it's so easy to cause like a rift, even on the personal side.
So
Is
yeah,
that what you're saying?
well, just clarify a little bit. What I mean is, it's not. I don't have a problem with the way I'm living my life, right? But it's how other people interpret. If they have this in their mind that this is that we're biological creatures on a cycle of life, and this is how we do the cycle best. And anyone who's not doing that is something wrong with them, right? That there's no other way to do it. There's this best way to do things. And so I'm fine. I'm 100% completely happy. I follow my heart. I've always followed my heart throughout my entire life. I'm good with where I am and what I'm doing, but not necessarily other people are. And so my point is that it's so easy to just completely negate a person because of this sort of linear mentality.
Well, I thought I had heard that it's so easy to cause a rift just because in a relationship, like it sounds like that's what's happened with you and perhaps this other person that mentioned you're doing things backwards. Seems like, yes, we're acknowledging that there is this perception that we have to do things in a certain order, and that is the kind of our measurements of success. And I think I'm hearing that you think you could be perfectly happy with that, but yet there's still maybe some underlying issues with when somebody makes that judgment of, oh, you're doing something backwards. Am I not hearing you right, or do you think?
I'll just say a couple of things. Really good. Just a couple of things for clarification. Just to put it out there, because I want to make sure that I don't have a rift with my friend. It's just something that he mentioned. Yeah. But it's just an interesting observation. But the other thing is that no, I fully encourage people to completely bounce off that linear timeline. I'm not at all married to this idea that things. I mean, I understand why we did it in the past in history, but I think we're evolving, and I think that. I think that if we encourage people to just bounce off that timeline and be their genuine selves, I think we're going to see a very, very different world. And I'll end there.
So
you don't have to read that, Sherry. I mean, I'm over time, I think so.
Oh, I didn't see a time.
Yeah.
Everybody's coming back. We're just going to have a debrief. So I think Valerie feels heard. So. Okay, great. Welcome back, everyone. So what we want to do now is go around and everyone take 30 seconds to a minute, just report on how that was for you. How was the circle and any insights that you might have coming from it. And actually, I'll start. I always love these circles. And the one insight that I got was that's really stuck with me is the measurements, how we measure success. If we measure success in money, or if we measure success in the level of empathy, the level of trust, the level of connection. And if we have an empathy movement, it's going to be about measuring the level of success is measured, by, I think, these intrinsic values of openness and transparency and trust and so forth. So that's something that's really sticking with me. Larry, do you want to go and then call on people individually to?
Yeah, I like that. Open, transparent, and that's what our circle was like today. It was just, wow, beautiful. We didn't make a lot of money, but we really did have a whole lot of just really trust, transparency, empathy. It was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful circle. And it feels good, like Carl Rogers said. It's kind of hard to define empathy, but when you feel it, it feels damn good. So that was my experience. And John, how was the circle for you today?
Really enjoyed the circle today as an introduction to this format. And likewise, I felt that we had a lot of understanding and trust and transparency. And it got me, we didn't make a lot of money either, but I think it did pay off in lighting a spark that like this, there's something here that others could benefit from. And it's all about how we, the best way to approach that and the best way to measure it when it's all said and done.
Thank you, John. Sherry, how was the circle for you today?
Well, this was an introductory session for me, and I came in a little late. My apologies. And I think I was tasked with a lot of active listening, and I found it challenging, even though I thought I was a good active listener. So I think it's been a great practice run and awareness building experience for me. I think I have encountered some very formative minds here today, and I am very, very encouraged by the conversation that we have. Some good people and some good minds working on the problems, acknowledging that this is probably one of the central pieces of the puzzle that's missing to a lot of what's wrong with our world today. So I'm very encouraged from having been a part of my first session today.
Thank you, Sherry. Melanie, how was the circle for you today?
I really liked our circle. There was some really good empathy skills being shared. And I think the one thing I got out of it that I'm thinking about is this thing about intimacy. And it's kind of shifted the way I've looked at it. Like if you have it inside yourself, you're not seeking, you don't have to seek it outside yourself. Maybe you'll just attract it. I don't know. But anyway, I just like that perspective that came up at the end of the session. And I'm going to read the book, Being Nobody, Going Nowhere. Yeah, so there was something about that whole conversation that shifted me a little bit, and I am grateful.
Thank you, Melanie. And Mike, how was the circle for you today?
Yeah, I agree with Melanie. I think it was a more emotional circle than I've ever been in before, and so I was resonating with a lot of childhood emotions, and also I liked the idea of understanding that intimacy comes kind of from within. I mean, you have to be intimate with yourself first, I guess, then it goes out. Just like empathy, you have to be empathic with yourself before you can go out to other people. Well, anyhow, it was a great circle.
Thank you, Mike. And Jana, how was the circle for you today?
I'm very grateful that I popped in. We had a beautiful circle, and I guess my three takeaways are words from Melanie: are authenticity, transparency, and connection. But everyone, I also very much appreciated. We have like a whole team of people concerned about psychiatric trauma from the medical system. And I would like to see truth, healing, and reconciliation in psychiatry. And I'm thinking in that direction. I'm not sure if empathy circles can be part of that vision, if people will be interested, and even to have truth, healing, and reconciliation in psychiatry, but definitely mental health needs some healing. So yeah, I really appreciated that sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jana. And Valerie, how was the circle for you today?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I think I'm actually just picking up on some things still. There's a lot of the metrics and the way we measure success and so forth that we were talking about in our circle, and just hearing Dana right now, or Jana, sorry, talking right now about the truth and reconciliation and healing within the mental health field. And I think that speaks to how people are treated on what we were talking about in our circle. And I've talked about this before, about how we're on this linear timeline, which the corporate capitalism feeds off of, and that there are throwaway people that sort of add to sort of the greater good, if you will, this utilitarian sort of attitude that that it's so that the people are expendable as part of the system, because the system itself is doing its own thing. It's that there's some greater good in there that we're all supposed to understand and be members of and agree to, and so forth. And I think that empathy, the way that we're doing this here, I think can really shed some light into how those are wrong or erroneous premises that lead to a lot of damage, and that we don't need to think like that. We can throw that timeline away. We don't need it, and we can really learn a whole new way of interacting with each other. So I really got a lot out of today. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Valerie. And Anne, how was your circle today?
I loved it. I feel enriched and happy. I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
And Bill, how was your circle today?
Oh, the circle was great. I really enjoyed it. I was very stimulated, and I just really enjoy the process of new people coming in and becoming friends and collaborators.
Thank you, Bill. And Edwin, would you like to share more on your circle?
Yeah, I'll kind of close this out. I hope you'll come back to the next meetings. We'll keep working on how do we build this movement. We keep gathering insights, documenting it, and kind of bring more people in. And we have a schedule. I'm going to put that into the chat, the upcoming schedule. So there's a link to all the different upcoming cafes, but the big one for us is, actually tomorrow there's one, which you'll see on the schedule there. We're starting a series on interfaith dialogues. So that's tomorrow at 1 p.m. Pacific time. So you're welcome to come to that to discuss that topic. I know people who are into spirituality will be of interest. And a big one is Talk with the Cops, building better relationship with the communities. And I put 2 links in there. So I hope all of you who are experienced facilitators, who have done this a few times. So, Melanie is very experienced. Mike, you've done a couple of empathy circles. You'd have enough experience to facilitate. So we have 110 people signed up so far on Eventbrite. We're working with Police to Peace, an organization that works with the police departments around the country, and they've really promoted this. So, there's going to be like police chiefs, people working in police departments and community, and we're going to go into, empathy circles of 4 or 5. So we need plenty of facilitators. So hope you'll come and help facilitate. We never know how many we're going to show up, but the more facilitators, the better. It's only an hour and a half. The session it's not a very good time for Europe, unfortunately. It's quite early in the morning there. So anyway, those are the links there. So I hope you'll click on that and sign up. Yeah, Valerie?
Yeah, hi, sorry. I just wanted to add a link into the chat because I just can't resist. It just has to do with ageism. It's a TED Talk, and it's pretty fascinating. But I wanted to ask John, just like, because with the men's group, I'm trying to do something at the university similar, and I was just wondering if you might have some time to talk either later today or some other time that we could arrange, and I just wanted to ask. Thank you.
Yeah, you can put your emails into the chat if you, there you go.
Sure, happy to.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that's, yeah, Melanie.
The talk with cops on you, when I tried to register, it said it was sold out.
Oh, no, I gotta contact her to let her. That means we went up to 125. I think she upped it. So thanks for hang in there with it and check back. So I'm going to contact her because I think I want to have up to 200, I think is the limit on that, because not everybody shows up.
Yeah.
So thanks for letting.
You don't want to send me an email about it, do you?
Are you on the email distribution list?
I think so. I get emails from you sometimes.
Okay, well,
And
I'm
also
gonna
through
send
LinkedIn.
the URL. I'll have the Zoom room for that.
Okay.
Yeah, I want it to be huge. that she has a Zoom room that'll take 300. So
Okay.
and actually I created a LinkedIn event, and she created her own LinkedIn event for her community. She has 600 people on LinkedIn that said they were interested, and on mine it's 200. So but not everybody shows up, so it's good to really overbook. So anyway, thanks for letting me know that I'm going to email her right away to up the limit on that. So okay, I think that's it. Anyone else join us next Saturday, tomorrow for Interfaith, those two cafes. Wait a little while to sign up. I'm going to have her change that. And I think that's it. Monday is another Empathy Cafe with Bill. Bill has a Thursday empathy in the schools, and then Larry has another building a cult empathy movement on Fridays. So that's all on the schedule. So hope you can join us there. So we'd like to end with our jazz hands. If you want to just jazzy away, and see you next time. Thanks everyone for taking part.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.